how do I film, edit, color grade the videos that I shoot on my iPhone 13 Pro Max? I'm about to share all of it with you, like right now. Well, if you've seen any of my recent short films, the Yosemite one, the Light and Shadows one, which were all 100% shot on this iPhone 13 Pro Max, you may have wondered to yourself, dang, how did Brian shoot and edit and color grade all of this footage? It looks cinematic. It definitely doesn't look like it was shot on an iPhone. So I wanted to make this video to share with you guys my secrets, my tips, my tricks on exactly how I created these films. And if you are shooting with the iPhone 13, I'm hoping this video will help you to go create some amazing content right in the palm of your hand. Now, if you didn't know, I'm shooting all of this footage in cinematic mode. Now, I did do a full review on cinematic mode. If you want to check that video out, click up above. But cinematic mode on the iPhone 13 simply offers you 30 frames per second at 1080p resolution in Dolby Vision HDR. So you can't actually manipulate the settings beyond that. I personally think the footage still looks really good, but one thing I'm not a huge fan of is that 30 frames per second. It just looks a bit more like footage for a soap opera or like live TV, sports, and the news. One of the first things that I do when I get my footage into my video editing software, Adobe Premiere Pro, is I actually set my project frame rate to 23.976, and then I take my 30 frames per second footage and slow it down by 80%, and this gives me a much smoother feeling footage. If you take a look at some of these shots here, comparing the 30 frames per second footage to that same footage slowed down by 80%, you can definitely see a huge difference. Now, also when you're shooting in cinematic mode, you have two camera focal length options, the 1x camera and the 3x. I pretty much shoot all of my footage with the 1x camera, which is a 26mm focal length, and I found that the artificial depth of field that cinematic mode creates is just better with the 1x camera. I do shoot some stuff at the 3x camera, but I'm typically not trying to create any depth of field with it. Additionally, I keep my aperture at f2.8. I like a more shallow depth of field. Again, this all helps to create a much more cinematic look. I could bump the aperture to like f8, or I think it even goes all the way up to f16, but I just prefer a more shallow depth of field. It just gives you more of that like it was shot on a cinema lens. One thing I do when I open up the camera, go to cinematic mode and shoot, is adjust the exposure. I've personally found that the iPhone exposure right at 0 just feels a little too bright. Not that it's overexposed, but it just feels a bit too bright for me. So I usually take it down to like -1, and it also saves me a little bit of time in post-processing because it's that much closer to the final product in terms of coloring and exposure and all of that. For my light and shadows video, I actually used my Ronin S gimbal and kind of rigged it to a piece to an iPhone tripod. It was kind of a sketchy situation, so I wouldn't recommend that. You don't need that nice of a gimbal for your iPhone. What I actually bought recently is the DJI OM5, and it's much more adequate for the job at a much better price point. It's only 160 bucks. It keeps a fantastic battery charge on it. You can get really smooth shots with it. You can run with it. It just does the job. Probably about 80% of my shots, maybe even 90% of my shots are with the gimbal. And then I do some handheld stuff. If I'm getting tight detail shots, I usually don't want to be like trying to get into tighter spaces with the gimbal. And if I don't need to be like running around with it, you know, it's easy to just take it out of your pocket and shoot with it like that without having to get the gimbal set up. I would definitely recommend this for sure. It's linked in the description. Click on that link, spend 160 bucks and get smoother footage. I personally use Adobe Premiere Pro to color grade all of my footage, and what I typically do is actually create 2 iterations of Lumetri color. The first iteration of Lumetri color is usually going to be adjusting basic settings, things like white balance, exposure, highlights and shadows, some basic tone curve adjustments. Now keep in mind, just the unedited cinematic mode footage already looks good, so I find that I don't have to do a ton of crazy just basic adjustments. So that's all within that first iteration saturation of Lumetri color. Then I add an additional Lumetri color and start to really dial in specifically on the red, green, and blue tone curves. This is where I might add even more vibrance, saturation, a lot more color and creative adjustments on that second Lumetri color. You might be asking, well, Brian, why do you do the 2 layers of Lumetri color? Why not just do 1? And I found that with 2 layers of Lumetri color, I can make a lot more subtle yet still dynamic adjustments to the footage I'm color grading. With just 1 Lumetri color, I found that I'm pushing the sliders and the control points a lot more to achieve the results that I want. It just ends up looking over edited. I wish I could give you an exact science to this, but so much of what I'm doing is referencing other filmic looks, films that I'm personally a fan of, just replicating that cinematic color. Now, with all of that in mind, I'm super stoked to share with you guys 2 preset packs that are for Adobe Premiere. One is based on the Yosemite short film and one is based on the Light and Shadows film. If you go to the link in the description, you can actually buy those preset packs and with like 1 click get the colors that I've been able to achieve. I spent a lot of time dialing in these colors and really getting them to look very filmic, very cinematic. They're specifically tailored for that cinematic mode footage. You can try it on other iPhone footage as well. Check the link in the description and get those creamy, yummy, delicious cinematic colors. The only other thing I do that makes my footage feel very cinematic is add those black bars to the top and the bottom of the footage, and that just gives you that more anamorphic widescreen classic film look to it. And I simply do this by adding an adjustment layer, and from there I add a crop effects to the adjustment layer, do a 15% crop on the top and the bottom of the footage, and there you go. Typically, when I just have a bunch of unedited iPhone shots, I'm gonna start cutting up and finding some of my most epic and eye-catching shots first, and then I'll jump over to Logic Pro and start working on the music. And usually I'll get a rough idea down for the soundtrack, and I'll get that idea over into Premiere and start cutting a lot more of the film. And it's a bit of a back and forth between the music and the cutting until I find a really good spot with the music and then finish the cutting in Premiere and then finalize the music in Logic. This is probably one of the most time-consuming parts, is getting all of that to sync up and making sure the story both visually and sonically makes sense and meshes well together. If you guys didn't know, which I would imagine you do at this point, but I did start a music licensing company called Mood Sound Design. I've personally been producing music for over a decade now, and I thought with my video experience as well as my music production experience, I might as well join those forces and create a company that offers just good music to videographers and filmmakers. So if you need good music for your videos, which if you're already making epic cinematic mode footage with your iPhone, you probably do need good music, go to moodsounddesign.com and start a free trial with us, and you're probably gonna find some pretty sick music for your next video project. So I hope you're inspired and stoked by this video to go out and create something epic with your iPhone. Technology is getting pretty crazy with these things, and I'm super excited to see where it goes within the next few years. Go get those preset packs, sign up for Mood Sound Design. It's all linked in the description. And if you hit that like button as well as the subscribe button, that would just warm my heart. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Peace.